Nikola Tesla and Colorado Springs. Having been invited to Colorado Springs to build his laboratory by Westinghouse patent attorney Leonard E. a longtime advisor and friend through the difficult years of the Battle of the Currents, Tesla shipped his equipment in early spring 1899. Before he left New York, and as the coup de grâce to his relationship with T.C. Martin, Tesla met with competing editor Charles W. Price of Electrical Review and professional photographer Dickinson Alley to choreograph a spectacular piece on the wizard's laboratory, complete with auric description of his experiments and a sensational series of photographs. The article ran in the March 29, 1899 issue, starting with a full-length portrait of the inventor grasping a basketball-sized wireless vacuum lamp glowing resplendently. The essay went on to describe the evolution of other inventions, such as his high-tension transformer, which resulted in Tesla's flat, spiral transmitting coil. This 8-foot transmitter, easily recognizable by its spider-web appearance, was the first which efficiently enabled the inventor to generate two individualized vibrations or tuned circuits simultaneously and also produce many millions of volts. Other prints depicted the flamboyant engineer transmitting high currents through his body to illuminate a variety of vacuum tubes, such as one which he whipped around his head in a multiple exposure, with one hand seeming to pluck a refulgent rod out of the midst of a spiral galaxy of blurred light, and the other grasping a sparking, circular high-tension coil. The operator's body was charged to a great potential. Tesla arrived in Colorado Springs on May 18, 1899, after stopping in Chicago to display his telautomaton to the Commercial Club, a local electrical society, situated at the very gateway to the Rocky Mountains, at the edge of a plain that stretched for hundreds of miles. The Colorado site would prove an excellent choice not only for monitoring wireless energy generated from his transmitter, but also for studying a common phenomenon in the region, the electrical storms. Stepping from the station after his week-long journey, the inventor was met by Curtis and a few dignitaries. A horse and carriage took him to his hotel, the Alta Vista, where he stayed, in room 207.4, much like his childhood home in Smiljan. The town was situated at the foothills of a mighty chain of mountains. The Rockies arose so suddenly that they looked almost as if they were still being formed. A view on a clear day stretched virtually to Wyoming to the north and New Mexico to the south, and it was Ackerman's sight to witness lightning storms in the distance while standing in sunshine. Hoping to be the Little London of the West, the people of the Springs welcomed the great inventor by honoring him with a banquet, sponsored by Curtis, at the El Paso Club, well known throughout the region because his AC power transmission system had been adopted at lead, silver, and gold mines in such camps as Telluride and Cripple Creek. Tesla was happily met by society people, town officials, and the governor. A few days later, another notable also came to town, Admiral Schley, recently back from his victory in Santiago Bay. The entire town celebrated the hero's visit. No doubt Tesla had easy access to the Admiral, and they probably discussed the potential use of his telautomaton as a weapon to help abolish war. As part of Tesla's arrangement, with Curtis's guarantee, the El Paso Electric Company provided Tesla with free electrical power to support the Great Quest. Local contractor Joseph Dozier was introduced to discuss construction of the lab. Off they drove down Pikes Peak Avenue to what is now the corner of Quote Street, near Prospect Lake, to look the site over. Dozier, it appears, had a mystical bent, so discussions drifted to talk of life on other planets and unusual ways to search for gold in the nearby hills. The inventor had traveled west for a variety of reasons, particularly his wish to experimentally verify that he could transmit light, information, and power to vast distances by means of wireless. I wanted to be free of the disturbing influences in the city which make it very difficult to tune circuits, the inventor added. Tesla had embarked on a massive plan that presupposed an understanding of a technology which even challenges today's comprehension of power distribution systems. Details of the work would remain secret, Tesla not even revealing his intent to erect the station until almost the day he departed. From the very first day of his arrival, he announced rather optimistic plans, telling town columnist Mrs. Gilbert McClurg, wife of the Secretary of the Chamber of Commerce, who wrote under the nom de plume Desire Stanton, "With my wireless telegraph oscillator, I could talk to the inhabitants of the planet Mars, if they know enough to take a message, and will talk to the people of the Earth at any distance away, without the assistance of wires." There was a popular notion, and even astronomical speculation, that other planets were inhabited and that Mars could be contacted. Growing large fields with flora planted in different colored symbols or creating giant reflecting surfaces to flicker signals were two other proposals espoused by writers in the technical journals that received serious consideration. With Percival Lowell's magnificent telescope only a few hundred miles away, in Flagstaff, Arizona, reports of Martian activities were a commonplace topic of conversation. With Tesla's arrival, in Desire's words, "The day of real power is not far distant. I would light whole cities and give to mere machines all the motions of intelligence," said Tesla. "But my first plan is to simply collect experimental data, mount instruments and record experiments at different atmospheric levels." Tesla's plan for cabling across the Atlantic is to erect two terminal stations, one in London and one in New York, with the oscillators placed at the top of high towers, communicating thence with great discs suspended in captive balloons floating 5,000 feet above the Earth to catch the strata of rarefied air through which electrical waves travel most easily. A message could be flashed instantly by these lightning rays from the oscillator to the disc in the balloon, and across the thousands of miles of intervening space to the second disc. Mr. Tesla says he is ready to put his wireless system into operation as soon as the practical details can be arranged. His scheme was multifaceted. He could utilize the ionosphere to act as a conduit or a reflector of the electrical waves. He could use the intrinsic electrical impulses of the Earth itself, that is, its geomagnetic pulse as a carrier wave. Or he could transmit energy in the more conventional wireless way with one single tuned circuit on the transmitting and receiving end, such as he had demonstrated in his public lectures in London, Paris, New York, Philadelphia, and St. Louis. That is, by using a resonant tuned circuit, comprising a transmitter and receiver, an aerial and ground connection. Or he could use conventional copper lines. With Colorado Springs 6,000 feet above sea level, one of his first experiments involved the transmission of very high frequencies up on wires to terminals situated 2 miles in the sky. 6. Helium-filled balloons more than 10 feet long were ordered from a balloon farm in Germany run by Professor Myers, and thousands of feet of wire and cable were shipped from the Houston Street Lab. Other equipment included batteries, receiving and measuring instruments, switches, transformers, vacuum pumps, and dozens of types of electronic tubes, specially prepared by a Manhattan glassblower. Also, his huge oscillators and gargantuan Tesla coils were shipped, although his novel, flat, spiral transmitter, which appears so prominently in the 1898 photographs of his New York laboratory, was not sent. Louis Ullmann, one of Fisk's key engineers, was placed in charge of the equipment at Houston Street, with George Scherf business manager and liaison. Tesla's wireless experimental station was a large barn-like structure approximately 60 feet wide and 18 feet high, with a 20-foot-tall bulbous topped aerial whose height could be adjusted to differing lengths. Situated on East Pikes Peak Avenue, within walking distance of the center of town, the building was connected by transmission lines to the El Paso electrical station only a few miles away from their circuit. Tesla was able to draw, according to necessity, 100 horsepower and more, guarded by a sign which read "Great Danger. Keep out." The lab housed a high-frequency transformer and a Tesla coil with a diameter of 45 feet. All of his experiments would be carefully recorded in his private Colorado notebook, which was discovered in the 1950s among his papers at the Belgrade Museum. Theories, experiments, occasional personal observer tie-ins, and highly technical mathematical equations filled the pages. Tesla stated that his main reason for coming to Colorado was to produce a resonant transformer which would be capable of disturbing the electrical condition of part, if not the entire globe, thus enabling me to transmit intelligence to great distances without wire. The plan was actually quite simple. Tesla assumed that the Earth had a resonant frequency and therefore could be measured and utilized as a gigantic carrier wave to distribute electrical power. Since the entire Earth was in a harmonic relationship with his equipment, Tesla claimed that there would be no diminution in the intensity of the transmitted impulses. It is even possible to make the actions increase with distance from the plot, according to an exact mathematical law. By regulating the height of the aerial, different wavelengths could be created which could be measured in terms of their harmonic relationship to the natural electrical properties of the Earth. A few weeks later, Tesla summoned Fritz Lowenstein, Just 25 years old and a recent German immigrant, Lowenstein had only been working for Tesla for a month. Thus, there was a question about his ability to be reticent about the work. Nevertheless, he was, as Tesla said, a man possessed of the highest technical training and probably the most formally educated of his crew. In June, Tesla experimented with a wireless telephone, although it is not known whether he actually transmitted spoken words. To Astor, he wrote, the following year, "There is nothing novel in telephoning without wires to a distance of 5 or 6 miles. Since this has been done often before in this connection, I have obtained 2 patents." Whether or not Astor was completely aware of Tesla's plan to leave New York to set up an experimental station in Colorado Springs is unknown. Astor had been in Europe during much of the planning stages of the venture, returning to New York on June 14th. Certainly Tesla notified Astor of his plans, but this author suspects that the financier did not find out until after their business arrangement was solidified. As Astor was expecting progress on the oscillators and cold light, he probably had mixed feelings when he contacted Scherf to check on Tesla's progress. Professor Meyer's balloons had finally arrived. They should only be about 2/3 inflated, Myers warned, as otherwise they may burst when they attain some height. He has also included some kites, Scherf wrote with the shipment. The balloons were launched in July, but they are too heavy and do not work well. The scheme, although plausible, was cumbersome, as energy would have had to be transmitted up a long wire, which weighed down the balloon or kite in a somewhat haphazard fashion, and then another balloon placed at some distance would be needed to receive the transmission, and then send it down long wires to instruments on the ground. For numerous reasons, this line of investigation was abandoned. Next on the agenda was the measurement of the electrical properties of the Earth, monitoring electrical storms, and creating electromagnetic oscillations that would be in a harmonic relationship to terrestrial currents. Uppermost in Tesla's mind was the problem of individualization of messages and protected privacy. Therefore, most of his experiments involved the combination of 2 or more frequencies and the construction of receiving instruments tuned to these specific arrangements. The chief feature of a practical wireless telegraph system, Tesla told Lowenstein, is the secrecy, immunity and selectivity of the oscillating and receiving apparatus. The inventor thereby set about to create a variety of mechanisms to produce multiple wavelengths. Whereas Marconi and the others were using inefficient Hertzian pulsed oscillations at very high frequencies, Tesla worked with continuous undamped oscillations in the low HF high frequency range. Do you understand what we are now trying to achieve? Yes, Mr. Tesla, Lowenstein replied. I understand that in this invention the elements of the receiving apparatus respond to the elements of the transmitter, and that only the zero action of the responding of all these elements of the receiver apparatus make the registering apparatus register. Excellent. On June 16th, Tesla set out to create an efficient ground connection. His workers were instructed to dig a hole 12 feet deep near a water main, and a copper plate 20 feet square was buried there. Water was kept constantly flowing upon the ground to moisten it and improve the connection. But the dry earth and the problem of rock formations interfered with the creation of a completely efficient setup. Nevertheless, purposely unsensitive receiving instruments placed 200 feet from the shop responded when connected to the ground. The action of the device was strong, even though it was concluded that the earth resistance was still too great. For the next series of experiments, Lowenstein was in charge of the transmitter, and Tesla attended to his numerous receivers. Lowenstein recalled, I handled myself the big transmitter sending 2 vibrations through the ground by 2 separate secondary circuits. Mr. Tesla would then go outside of the building, leaving me instructions for continuously switching the oscillator on and off in certain intervals. I don't know how far he went, but by the time he came back again in the afternoon, you may easily build an idea how far Mr. Tesla could have gone at the time I was standing at the switch. In 1916, Tesla stated that he occasionally conducted experiments as far as 10 miles from the station. On the eve of July 4th, one of the most stupendous electrical storms ever recorded in the region rocked Pikes Peak. Observations made last night. They were not to be easily forgotten for more than one reason. First of all, a magnificent sight was afforded by the extraordinary display of lighting. No less than 10,000 minus 12,000 discharges being witnessed inside of 2 hours. Some were of a wonderful brilliancy and showed often 10 or twice as many branches. While tracking the storm with his sensitive receiving apparatus, Tesla noticed that even though the storm had passed out of sight, The instruments began to play periodically. This was experimental verification of stationary waves, periodic electronic vibrations impressed upon the Earth itself. Also, troughs and nodal points were detected. It is now certain that they can be produced with an oscillator, Tesla wrote in his notebook, and then added in brackets, "This is of immense importance." Tesla wrote to his secretary the same day, "Dear Mr. Scherf, I have received messages from the clouds 100 miles away, and 2 days later, we have just about finished all the details. My work is really to begin in earnest right now." End of Nikola Tesla and Colorado Springs. Thank you for watching.